They have. They've been through Irma about 2 weeks ago. That was a glancing blow that knocked out power for more than 1 million people. This storm was a direct hit. There's still no telling exactly what the damage is in terms of human life and property. From this small vantage point we have, we can sense it's going to be significant. Even some of these well-built hotels behind us took a pounding, especially in the 9 o'clock hour when there were sustained gusts here of more than 145 miles per hour. Much of the island lives in single-family dwellings, often zinc roof, wooden houses, so those are going to be demolished all across the island. FEMA has pre-positioned about 3,500 people across the island. They're going to have an air bridge here to get in needed supplies. Right now, about 100% of the entire island is without electricity. People have moved into shelters in the run-up to the storm, but the real danger now comes from flooding. Now that the winds have died down a little bit, people have had to move up to higher levels in shelters, in gymnasiums, in stadiums, just to get away from that flood water. The good news at this point is the winds here in San Juan dying down to just about the point where first responders and police can go out and start assessing the damage, start rescuing people, but it's still not easy to move around with all the water and the debris. Harris, back to you.
We saw this incredibly damaged structure that we wanted to check out and get a couple pictures of. We were walking through the structure, and as I was walking through it, this deer popped up, and I don't know who was more scared, myself or the deer. It looked a little thirsty, so we went and got a couple bottles of water, and I couldn't believe it how much water it drank, but it drank 4 bottles of water. So later on in the afternoon, we consulted with an FWC officer and said,
All right, folks, welcome to the Fox 10 News Now story, part of Fox10Phoenix.com. We're going to take you out to San Diego, California, where Attorney General Jeff Sessions is going to talk about some major drug seizures.
I'm here today, but in this Navy Marine Corps town, but so was Mr. Issa. Congressman Issa was in the Army too, so but I'm not outnumbered because there's more Coast Guards behind me than there are soldiers. But a great man who is famous not just in Alabama but around the country for famously donning the "Make America Great Again" hat, and that's what he's doing. I would like to present to you our #1 law enforcement officer and the great Attorney General of these United States of America, Jeff Sessions.
Well, thank you very much, and Admiral Zucomp, congratulations to you and the crew of this vessel and the tremendous work you're doing. I got a briefing shortly after becoming Attorney General, and it became very clear to me that the single most vulnerable part of the entire drug network may be their weakness at sea. So much of their drugs were coming in that direction, and we aren't able to interdict sufficiently those ships that we knew existed. So the Coast Guard has now tripled their effectiveness in those months already, and this revelation today, this incredibly large seizures, makes, I think, validates that. We need to help them to be even more effective. I see Mark Kahn over here from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They prosecute these cases. Venue in these cases is the first place you bring this shipload of drugs to, and the defendants, they bring them into this district, and they're prosecuted here and other districts in California and on the Gulf Coast. Look, we are facing a tremendous challenge. In 2015, we had 52,000 people die from drug overdoses in this country, numbers the likes of which we've never, ever seen before. I've been involved in drug prosecutions since the 1970s as a young prosecutor. We never have seen these kind of deaths before. The preliminary numbers for 2016 look like it will be well over 60,000 deaths. We are facing a challenge in this country with drug abuse, addiction that we've never seen before. There are 3 things that we measure our effectiveness against when we consider how effective we are in preventing drugs availability. One is availability. Drugs are more available now than in many years. Another one is price. Drugs are cheaper now than we've seen in many, many years. And the purity of the drugs. We're seeing purity at levels we've never seen before in the country. Heroin and cocaine purity levels are extraordinarily high. So this is a very effective process that's ongoing. Coast Guard is leading. They're looking for ways every day to enhance their ability to interdict these ships, and they're making progress. As I've said, they've tripled that. We've got a great challenge in our country. The Department of Justice is resolutely committed to success. We work with the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, U.S. Marshals. We do so many things there. We work with our Homeland Security partners as they work on these issues, and the Coast Guard in particular. So thank you, men and women of the United States Coast Guard, the $600 million, $700 million seizures that you have here represent something extraordinary, and it's something we want to build on. We want to make put continued pressure on the cartels, call on the American people to reject the drug culture, crack down on prescription drugs that often lead to opioid excess, and crack down on this new and even more dangerous substance, fentanyl. Thank you all, and congratulations on the great work you're doing.
Thank you, Attorney General Sessions. We'll now open the floor for a brief question and answer session. Again, I remind you to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and introduce yourself and the agency that you represent, then direct your question to the specific spokesperson. The floor is open for questions. Yes, sir.
I've never felt that we should legalize marijuana. I think it doesn't strike me that the country would be better if it's being sold at every street corner. We do know that legalization results in greater use. The Medical Association, the Pediatric Association remain resolutely opposed to marijuana and point out the dangers that occur. States will make their own decisions. Federal law remains in effect.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Next question. Yes, ma'am. Channel 7.
No announcements have been made on that. It's a very, very important district indeed. All the California districts are large and critically important, and all the United States attorneys are. We are resolutely committed in the Department of Justice. My deputy, Rod Rosenstein, served as United States Attorney 12 years. I served as a U.S. Attorney for 12 years. We want the very best we can get. They lead important offices that are critical to law enforcement. They also provide leadership to all the federal agencies and our state and local partners, and that's so critical. So we give it great. You can be sure that we're giving it great attention. I would also note that we're a little ahead of certainly the last presidential nominees for United States attorneys, and we're going to keep working to get that done as soon as possible. We need help from the Senate because they have to confirm those nominations.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Well, in the United States, anybody can sue, but the United States of America has a border. The United States government has the control of that border and a responsibility to secure it. We would expect to be fully successful in moving forward with a border wall as Congress gives us the money to do so.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're doing in recent months, they've done a lot better job. We've been able to get more resources into the seaborne drug importations. We're stepping up enforcement on the border. We've got a lot more to do, but if we can continue to make the kind of progress we've seen, where we've seen nearly a 50% reduction in arrest on the border, that creates a virtuous cycle where we can give more attention to each individual case instead of having numbers so large it's difficult to respond. President Trump's leadership has been the single most dramatic factor in the reduction of illegal entries at our border. There's just no doubt about it. He sent a clear message, and we need to continue to send that message. If you want to come to America, make your application and come lawfully. And if you come unlawfully, we're going to apprehend you, we're going to deport you, and if you're bringing in drugs or illegal substances, you will be prosecuted. And if you get into the country unlawfully, and if you commit a drug offense or any other offense, and you get apprehended, you will be deported. And that's the right thing, because the American people are good and decent and absolutely correct. And they believe we should have a lawful system of immigration, one that serves the national interest and fairly adjudicates applications of entry to our country. And I would just note that we admit to permanent legal residents 1.1 million people every year to the United States. And we have hundreds of thousands of people here on work visas and educational visas in addition. So we're in a position, and we're going to work hard to support the President's agenda to create a lawful system of immigration, one that we can be proud of, one that serves the national interest. And in the process of that, we will reduce the flow of illegal drugs into the country.
Further to your question, the cooperation with Mexico and other countries has caused drug smugglers to try to skip and pass over countries that are, if you will, not cooperating. And so that's why the sea routes and the Coast Guard's mission has become so much more important. And if you can stay afterwards, I think what you'll see twofold. One, you'll see how far offshore, 1,000 miles or more, the smugglers are going to get into international waters to escape other countries, including Mexico. You'll also, I think, see that what's on board is not marijuana, it's cocaine and heroin, the drugs that are responsible for more loss of life than all car accidents in America combined. 60,000 people have died, and in disproportionate numbers from opiates. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Issa. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure I understood all that. It's probably off the subject, and I think we've agreed not to talk about matters off the subject.
Do you have another question you'd like to ask, ma'am? Any other questions? Yes, sir. Would you like to answer that, sir?
Look, we have unprecedented successful cooperation with federal, state, and local agencies. I've observed it for my entire political and legal career and prosecuting career. One of the sad things is we have this disagreement over sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, and the refusal of certain jurisdictions to cooperate with our colleagues, mostly our ICE agents, who have the responsibility under the law, the duty to arrest people who are in the country illegally, who commit, in addition to that, crimes against the United States of America. They are due to be deported, and I find it almost unbelievable that states and cities would object to that. Why in the world would they want to object to the law being followed, people who've come into the United States illegally and then commit additional crimes? Why they shouldn't be deported is beyond me. So I call on the cities and states to analyze what they're doing, the danger it's causing to their own communities, making our ICE officers have to hunt down people in neighborhoods that are far more risky when they could have picked them up at the jail after they've completed their sentence. So we need that cooperation. I'd urge our states to reconsider, and let's work together in an effective way.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for one more question. Yes, sir. Sir, that question's a little off topic. Again, we're trying to keep questions on today.
All right, folks, we are going to switch gears now, take you to the East Coast now. We're going from San Diego to New York City, where right outside the UN, and there's some sort of conference going on. Let's listen in.
Speech yesterday, which I said and do believe was the best speech of his entire presidency. And it was so important. That's a nonpartisan observation, of course. It was so important that he put the threat posed by the Tehran regime and its nuclear weapons program and its role as the central banker of international terrorism right in the center, along with the nuclear threat of North Korea. Obviously, if you look in the media these days, you see this North Korean threat advancing day by day, firing ballistic missiles over Japan, increasing the range of its ICBMs, perhaps a few weeks ago testing a thermonuclear weapon. We can talk a lot about the Iran nuclear deal, but the fact is the cooperation between the regime in Tehran and Pyongyang has been close for many, many years. And whatever accomplishments North Korea makes in the nuclear and ballistic missile field, the Ayatollahs can have the next day by writing a check that's large enough. That's where the real threat comes from, and that's what I think the world needs to understand. There are not two separate problems here, the North Korean problem and the problem of the Ayatollah's regime. They are basically the same problem. The axis of evil is not a metaphor, it's a reality. And I think we've seen this for a long time. You know, the mullahs got their first missile capability 25 years ago when North Korea sold it to them. They've worked together with North Korea on expanding and enlarging and increasing the capability of their missile forces for the entire period of time since then, including in 1998 in particular, when North Korea declared a moratorium on launch testing from the Korean Peninsula. They simply shifted their missile program to Iran, and why not? The objectives of the missile programs are the same. We're
going to need more boats. We're going to need more planes. We're going to need more partners. But we are making progress. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for question and answers today. The crew of the Coast Cutter Stratton invites you all aboard their ship to view the narcotics. We'll also have one-on-one interview opportunities available with the commanding officer and the crew of the Coast Guard Cutter Stratton. And if you have any follow-up questions, we'll have personnel on board the flight deck who can address those follow-up questions if we didn't get all the information that you needed during this briefing. For our distinguished guests, we are grateful and honored by your presence. Thank you so much for being here today. And for the members of the press, thank you very much for telling this important story. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this press briefing. Thank you.
Well done.
All right, folks, we are going to move away from footage of Hurricane Maria devastating Puerto Rico. We're going to take you now to New York, United Nations luncheon, where we are expecting the First Lady Melania Trump to make some remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States of America, Melania Trump.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. I would like to welcome and thank all of you for joining me here today. I'm honored to serve as First Lady of the United States, and I look forward to sharing with each of you my sincere hopes for all that we will be able to do together to promote peace, human rights, and human dignity, leaving no one behind, especially not our children. The most important and joyous role I ever had is to be a mother to my young son. And what could possibly be more essential focus in everyone's life than that of loving, educating, and bringing up our next generation to be happy, productive, and morally responsible adults. Together, we must acknowledge that all too often is the weakest, most innocent, and vulnerable among us, our children, who ultimately suffer the most from the challenges that plague our societies. Whether it is drug addiction, bullying, poverty, disease, trafficking, illiteracy, or hunger, it is the children who are hit first and hardest in any country. And as we all know, the future of every nation rests with the promise of their young people. If we look at the present state of children in any society, we will see the future that our world can expect tomorrow. Show me your civic lessons of today, and I will show you your civic leaders of tomorrow. Show me your history lessons of today, and I will show you your political leaders of tomorrow. Show me the loving bonds between your families today, and I will show you the patriotism and moral clarity of your nation tomorrow. Our choices on how we raise and educate our children will in fact provide the blueprint for the next generation. If we do not advocate a love of country to our children and the generations to come, then why would our children grow up to fight for their countries, founding principles, and moral truths? If we do not teach our children the importance of helping those less fortunate, wherever they may be, then why would they become caring adults who dedicate themselves to charity? If we do not ensure that our youth redefine their nation of community to reach beyond their own backyards, their own schools, and their own town halls, then why would we accept to see a new generation of leaders with a moral conscience that includes all of humanity? When we join together as parents, caring for children, wherever they live in our own families across the street, across the nation, or across the globe, we claim our responsibility to the next generation to ensure they are prepared to accept the torch of leadership for the world of tomorrow. And make no mistake, this will always begin with us, coming together to embrace parenthood's noble calling. Nothing could be more urgent nor worthy a cause than preparing future generations for the adulthood with true moral clarity and responsibility. To achieve this, we must come together for the good of our children, because through them our future will be defined. Therefore, we must teach each child the values of empathy and communication that are at the core of the kindness, mindfulness, integrity, and leadership, which can only be taught by example. By our own example, we must teach children to be good stewards of the world they will inherit. We must remember that they are watching and listening, so we must never miss an opportunity to teach life's many ethical lessons along the way. As adults, we are not merely responsible, we are accountable. I hope you will join me in recommitting ourselves to teaching the next generation to live by and honor the golden rule, to unto others as you would have them unto you, which is my paramount in today's society, and I'm focused as First Lady. It remains our generation's moral imperative to take responsibility for what our children learn. We must turn our focus right now to the message and content they are exposed to on a daily basis through social media, the bullying, the experience online and in person, and the growing global epidemic of drug addiction and drug overdose. No children should ever feel hungry, stalked, frightened, terrorized, bullied, isolated, or afraid, with nowhere to turn. We need to step up, come together, and ensure that our children's future is bright. In the coming months, I hope to reach out to each one of you here today, to call upon you for your support and guidance, and look forward to joining you in collaboration to support and educate our next generation. I'm asking leaders on social media whose target market for their products and platforms is children, as well community and educational leaders, to join me in this fight for the hopes and dreams of our children. With all my heart, I want to thank you, each one of you, for being here today, and tell you how much I'm looking forward to working with you on behalf of our children. God bless our children, God bless our nations, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
All right, welcome here to News Now. You're taking a live look as Hurricane Maria slamming into Puerto Rico. It's a Category 4 storm and so far has killed 7 people. Hi, everybody. Mike Page along with Ron Hoon as we've been really just tracking this devastating hurricane, another one that is just slamming the Caribbean.
You know, they are saying that this is the worst to hit in about 2 generations in Puerto Rico, and it's so interesting how we track time after time the way these storms come in. They blow across the Caribbean, and then, of course, we're primarily worried here in the U.S. about, okay, what's the track going to show? Is it going to slam into Florida? Is it going to cut across the Gulf? Are we going to see something in New Orleans? Are we going to see something in Houston, which unfortunately this year we did? We've got so many major cities there. But San Juan, you know, even though Puerto Rico is not a state, it is a U.S. territory. And that is a major city.
Yes.
And you look at that picture right there. Watch that American flag just being whipped around in those winds. The photographer, that's a great shot that you got there, Mike.
Yeah,
with the guy, you know, trying to clean the lens, just keep the picture going.
I mean, you're talking 140 to 150 mile per hour winds that are just devastating this island.
I have not been to Puerto Rico since I was a high school kid. Back in the 1970s, we took a family trip down that way, and I found the island to be absolutely beautiful. Although I will say, in downtown San Juan, which the whole reason we went there was my aunt used to own a furniture store in downtown San Juan, Puerto Rico. I know it sounds somewhat random, but that is what she did.
Yeah,
she moved there and ended up, you know, buying this furniture store, and it has the cool, almost European feel of the narrow streets, you know, and kind of the historic feel of that downtown. I mean, let's face it, there's a real history there in Puerto Rico, and I'm just heartbroken to think that by the time this storm has fully cut across Puerto Rico, you know, and then moved on, we don't believe it's going to strike the mainland. It's going to turn to the north pretty soon, but it's coming across Dominican Republic and Haiti, the island of Hispaniola. I'm just really concerned, Mike, that when they finally get it out later today and into the day tomorrow, they're just going to really see devastation.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part there of this hurricane. We do have a Fox News correspondent out there. Here is the latest info.
The back end of this eye is hitting San Juan right now. We've seen some steady gusts of wind, more than 100 miles per hour. The worst of it hit about 9 o'clock in the morning. That's when we saw the destructive winds really tearing apart some of these buildings behind me. Bits of walls, balconies, satellite dishes all over the place here. Tops of trees snapped off as well. It's really going to be 2 prongs of danger from this storm. The initial destructive winds, the worst that have hit this island of 3.5 million in more than 80 years, and then a possible surge and rain that could produce flash flooding. As much as 15 inches of rain and a storm surge of up to 10 feet. That's got people really worried on the back end of the storm. It's been described by the governor as life-threatening and catastrophic. They've positioned FEMA teams here across the island to try and help with the relief. There have been 500 shelters opened up, but right now, almost 100% of the island is without electric power. So it's going to be a long, hard climb out of this, and perhaps at least a day before we know just how destructive and deadly the storm has been.
Yeah, I mean, take a look there at the damage from this building right here. I mean, the whole facade is ripped off.
Yeah, and that's one of the points they were making. You know, when we heard from the governor there, the governor general, several of the key leaders in the state of territory of Puerto Rico, saying evacuate or die. You have to be in a building that is constructed of such material that you're going to be able to live through this. And the concern is some of the older homes, some of the homes that were not well built, wood structures, that potentially could just be blown to bits.
Yeah, so we will continue to track Hurricane Maria here for you right here on News Now. But you know what? One of the great things about News Now is that we get so many feeds coming in from across the country. And the newest one that just popped up right now is former President Obama speaking in New York City. You know, he's starting to make these speaking engagements now. Yeah, you know, on the circuit.
So what Mike and I do is we sit down for a few minutes, we go over, we have a whole game plan, and then usually we throw it right out the window as soon as live feeds start coming in. That's the beauty of News Now. This stuff happens live. We take it for you as soon as it comes in.
There we go. So let's listen in to President Obama there in New York City.
The shift in what this country is and what it means is astonishing. Remarkable, and it's happened when you measure it against the scope of human history in an instant. Just since I graduated from college, crime rates, teen birth rates, dropout rates, the share of people living in poverty have dropped, and in some cases dropped dramatically. The share of Americans with college education is up, despite a massive global recession. In the final years of my presidency, the uninsured rate reached a new low. Median household income reached a new high. That's here in the United States. Worldwide, our progress is even more remarkable. And Bill can rattle off these statistics better than I can. But over the past 100 years, we've come from a world where only a small fraction of women could vote to a world where almost every woman can. Since the 1950s, the global average life expectancy has grown by more than 20 years. Since 1990, we have cut extreme poverty and childhood mortality in half. Keep in mind, I was in law school in 1990. It seems like yesterday. Since 2000, we've evolved from a world without marriage equality to one where it's a reality in more than 24 countries. All of this has happened in such a steady march that sometimes we have a tendency to take it for granted. But I often ask when I meet with young people, if you had to choose any moment in history in which to be born, and you didn't know in advance whether you were going to be male or female, what country you were going to be from, what your status was, you'd choose right now, because the world has never been healthier or wealthier or better educated or in many ways more tolerant or less violent than it is today. Fewer people are dying young. More people are living not only longer but better. More girls are in school. More adults can read. More children get the vaccines that they need. Despite the enormous conflicts that break our hearts around the world, it's demonstrable that fewer people are being killed in wars and conflicts than ever before. This would be the time you'd want to be, showing up on this planet. And these trends are real. They do not make us complacent, but they should spur us to action, because it shows, despite the naysayers and the cynicism, that in fact change can happen. They're not the result of mysterious forces of chance. They happen because countless people, like you, toiling for many years, chose to make this progress. Some, like Bill and Melinda, have enormous wealth and influence. Others, like Justin Trudeau, who I know addressed you earlier, have formal political offices. But the majority of people who made these advances were citizens, doctors, nurses, entrepreneurs, clergy, moms, community leaders, activists, union leaders, who mobilized and organized and voted and innovated and pushed for change. And by the way, they knew at every step of the way that they would not get everything they wanted as fast as they wanted. They knew that progress required struggle and perseverance and discipline and faith. They knew that sometimes for every 2 steps forward, you'll take a step back. But they made things better. And this is something I always had to emphasize to my staff when I was president. Better is good. No, you laugh, but sometimes people forget that. I will take better every time. So that's what's needed today. The engagement of everyone who wants to see a better future for our children. And it can be frustrating. I'll take an example here in the United States. Over the past 8 years, thousands upon thousands of Americans threw themselves into the collective effort of reforming our healthcare system. Those of you who live in countries that already have universal healthcare are trying to figure out what's the controversy here. I am too. These people But you know, the folks who did the work, it wasn't just policy wonks, it wasn't just politicians. It was moms and dads, people who had the experience of a sick child or crushing medical bills that threatened to bankrupt them. Maybe a parent who was lost to cancer that, had that person got a regular checkup, might have been caught earlier. And those voices from every walk of life in every corner of the country, against all odds, made a difference. And for the first time, more than 90% of Americans know the security of health insurance. Paying more for insurance or being denied insurance because of a pre-existing condition or because you are a woman, that's not a thing anymore. We got rid of that. And people are alive today because of it, and that's progress. Now, the legislation that we passed was full of things that still need to be fixed. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. And so when I see people trying to undo that hard-won progress for the 50th or 60th time, with bills that would raise costs or reduce coverage, or roll back protections for older Americans or people with pre-existing conditions, the cancer survivor, the expecting mom, or the child with autism or asthma, for whom coverage once again would be almost unattainable, it is aggravating. And all of this being done without any demonstrable economic or actuarial or plain common sense rationale, it frustrates. And it's certainly frustrating to have to mobilize every couple of months to keep our leaders from inflicting real human suffering on our constituents. But typically that's how progress is won and how progress is maintained on every issue. We have to stand up for each other, recognize that progress is never inevitable, that it often can be fragile, it's in need of constant renewal, and our individual progress and our collective progress depends on our willingness to roll up our sleeves and work. And not be afraid to work. So, in conclusion, each of us can make a difference, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here because otherwise you wouldn't be a goalkeeper. But many of you are young and maybe have only seen forward momentum and may not have seen backward momentum yet. Many of you may confront hurdles and roadblocks and disappointments in the future. And when that happens, that's the test. The test is not how do you feel when things are going good or when you are at a cool conference in New York with Bill and Melinda Gates and Will.I.am. Right? The test is when you're in the field and you're on the ground and you are doing work and people are resisting or misunderstanding or purposely undermining efforts that you know can make a difference. And how do you respond to that? And what I'm suggesting here today is that your response has to be to reject cynicism and reject pessimism and push forward with a certain infectious and relentless optimism. Not blind optimism, not one that ignores the scale and the scope of challenges, but that hard-earned optimism that's rooted in the stories of very real progress that have occurred throughout human history. And the recognition that our successes, even though sometimes they're small or incomplete, accumulate, they build, and they create a trajectory that's better.
And more News Now will continue next. Welcome back, everyone, to News Now, taking a live look here at beautiful downtown Phoenix on this Wednesday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page, happy to be with you here on News Now as we continue on with more coverage from breaking news from really all over the country. When it does become available, we bring it to you right here on News Now. But we do want to go into, it seems like every morning President Trump will put out about 3 tweets. It's never just one tweet. It's about 3 or 4 that he lines up there. So let's go through some of the ones that he just put out not too long ago. So take a look at this one, saying that Rand Paul is a friend of mine, but he is such a negative force when it comes to fixing health care. Graham Cassidy bill is great. End Obama care. And his next one, he says, I was saddened to see how bad the ratings were on the Emmys last night. The worst ever. Smartest people of them all are the deplorables. So he put that one out late last night. Interesting stuff always coming from when the president does tweet there. You never know really what he's going to say. I mean, over the weekend, he called the North Korean leader Rocket Man and then talked about that again at his United Nations speech. All right, moving on to another story here on News Now. This one, well, it's a little bizarre. We do have a video out of Illinois where police were pretty much being attacked by a bulldozer. An 18-year-old stole a bulldozer in Kankakee, Illinois. Wait till you see this video here, everybody. Take a look of That's the bulldozer smashing a police officer. Now, luckily, right there, that police officer was able to get out of the way. But we're going to take a look at some more dash cam video here. This is a runaway bulldozer. Look at this scene. I mean, they're actually chasing him, and it went about 12 blocks, according to the police report there, before they were finally able to get this teen out of the bulldozer and arrested. No reason why this happened. They don't know why the individual decided to take a bulldozer and go on a joyride, but this happened last month, and that dash cam video just being released now. Really bizarre. Luckily that no officers were hurt or any other people. You see them finally ripping that guy out of there, saying, all right, enough is enough. But you take a look at that video. I mean, this is the shot right here. That is, wow. I mean, got about 8 police officers chasing this runaway bulldozer. Interesting stuff there. All right, a nice story as well that we have for you right here, queued up on News Now. This is a great story as a deer was dehydrated in the Florida Keys after the massive Hurricane Irma striking the Florida Keys there, really devastating a lot of the Florida Keys out there. So an individual found this deer inside a home, heavily dehydrated, but they were able to really bring this deer back to life. Take a look at this cute little story that we got here.
Incredibly damaged structure that we wanted to check out and get a couple pictures of. We were walking through the structure, and as I was walking through it, this deer popped up, and I don't know who was more scared, myself or the deer. It looked a little thirsty, so we went and got a couple bottles of water, and I couldn't believe it how much water it drank, but it drank 4 bottles of water. So later on in the afternoon, we had consulted with an FWC officer, and he had said that the storm surge has taken out a lot of their fresh water supplies, so it's all mixed up with salt water. It's nice to help out the wildlife as well as the citizens of Monroe County.
All right, very cute story there. Congrats to that guy for helping that deer in need. Coming up in just a little bit right here on News Now, we're going to be talking about how flu season is upon us, and health officials saying that this season, well, it could be a tough one for people. So we'll get a little into that. We're going to have our very own Liz Kotelik up here to discuss that coming up just a little bit here on News Now. But we want to go back as we continue to monitor live feeds coming in right here. We're going to go back now to President Obama, now fielding questions, it looks like, from audience members in New York City. You are watching News Now.
Every great movement, you think about Gandhi in India, it started with his understanding of India's story and his own story, and seeing Indians in South Africa discriminated against, and recognizing that there were traditions and myths and a power in those stories that ended up driving out the most powerful empire on earth. It wasn't guns, and increasingly that will be the case, and certainly that will be the case if we want to move forward the sustainable development goals that we're talking about. Is we've got to be able to tell a story not only to big donors or politicians, but also to, for example, people here in the United States who may feel like, look, I've got my own problems. Why should I be worrying about somebody on the other side of the world?
Yeah, I have to say, when we got into philanthropy and particularly studied global health, we were stunned at the progress. We'd had no idea. Right. And it's kind of amazing if you ask even very well-educated people, what's happened with vaccination, what's happened with HIV. They don't know the positive story. And a little bit the news is always going to focus on the setbacks, because that's what happened that day. The gradual progress doesn't fit that paradigm. And even people who raise money for these causes, I have to say, you know, sometimes even some of the material we create is talking about the piece that remains as though it's never improved. Do you have any thoughts on how we get this more positive sense of progress going, and what, how we would get that word out?
Well, look, you're talking to somebody who for 7 years tried to get the word out that things were going pretty good, and nobody, at least about 40% of the country, didn't believe me. Until I was gone, and then suddenly they believed it, and they said things are great. So with that caveat, I'd make a couple observations. One, you're right, Bill, there is the nature of the media, and maybe just the human brain, is to fasten on what's wrong, not on what's right. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to change that, right? Visual displays of a fire are much more interesting than just a building sitting there. And so the fire is going to make the news. The building sitting there nicely and people are walking their dogs in front of it and stuff, that will not make the news. So I don't think that we can count on conventional media necessarily to spread the word. This is, though, where the power of the internet has not, I think, been harnessed the way it needs to be, particularly when we think about young people and young audiences. Malia and Sasha consume information differently than I do. And I think that those of us who've been involved with policy work are still putting out these reports with pie charts and this and that, and that's not interesting to them. But stories and visual representations of progress can go viral. There's a hunger for it. It's just that we don't systematically think about it. And so I think when the three of us were talking a while back, I mentioned that one of the areas that I'm deeply interested in is how do we build sort of a digital platform whereby people can go to find out what's happening that is moving the progress on issues and then activates them. Because I heard somebody, I think it was maybe Trevor, saying an important point. I'm very interested in how online communities can move offline. How this incredible power to convene through hashtags and tweets and this and that and the other eventually leads to people meeting each other and talking to each other. And I think that we have not fully tapped that as a way of spreading the word about progress that has been made. I also think it is important for us to put some friendly pressure on leaders to tell good stories and to make sure that we don't that we aren't so rigid in our partisanship or ideologies that we are not willing to acknowledge and share when somebody who might be of a different political persuasion has done something really good, even if it runs contrary to our short-term political interests. I mean, I always used to say, as big as the differences were between me and my predecessor, George W. Bush, that what his administration initiated with PEPFAR was a singularly important achievement that we needed to sustain and build on. And I didn't think that somehow detracted from me to say that somebody from another political party did something really smart.
All right, folks, more news now continues, including coming up next. Is it going to be that bad of a flu season? We'll see. All right, welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look here at the 202 westbound Alma School Road. As well, that's good. That's what we like to see on a Wednesday. Traffic going and no problems there. Now I'm joined by our very own Liz Kodalek. How you doing?
I am wonderful. How are you, Mike?
Good, good. Well, you know, it's a hump day Wednesday, and I think the week is shaping up. It's been going fast, I feel like.
Yeah, it has been going fast, but I have some bad news.
What do we got?
Flu season's starting early.
Oh, here we go. So you did a story today.
Yeah.
How is it shaping up? We want to know, what can we expect?
So normally we expect flu season to start like September, or I should say October. Yes. It goes through April normally, and we usually see it start again October and in those colder months.
Okay.
However, University of Arizona in Tucson, they have seen a lot of cases already. We're talking like more than 100 suspected cases of the flu, and we already have about 30 that have been confirmed as flu cases. So this is very early to start this flu season. That's what's leading doctors to be concerned and to kind of do the call out, the normal, hey, everyone needs to get their flu shot call out. They're doing it a little bit earlier this year, though.
Yeah, so they want to get the word out, be like, hey, if you want to take this vaccine,
right. Now's the time.
Let's do it now.
And the thing that they're saying is that it normally takes 2 weeks for the vaccine to fully take effect.
Okay.
So they're wanting you to do it now, especially seeing as we're seeing all of these cases already. Yes. They want you to do it now, so once it starts really ramping up, you'll be able to, have that vaccine and not hopefully be affected by it.
Yeah.
But as we know, there have been some times that the vaccine has not worked or it has not been as effective as doctors would want it to be, and that's because different strains of the flu are more prevalent in certain times of the year because they mutate and things like that. So I asked today this doctor, so what about this one? What about this vaccine this year? And he's like, it's too early to tell at this point. We have our fingers crossed and we're hoping, but they just want everyone to get it just in case.
Now, really, the people that should really get it immediately, right, is the children and senior citizens? That's right. Okay.
Right, yeah. They're the most, I don't know, in danger of having really bad side effects with the flu. So doctors are really wanting those types of people to get out there and get the flu shot. But again, it's not guaranteed, but it is your best bet in terms of, keeping yourself safe.
Okay. Well, that's interesting, too, because so many different strands of the flu. That's right. every year you need that different vaccine, right?
Exactly, yeah, because it mutates and changes, and you can't ever guarantee that, you know, last year's vaccine is going to be good for this year. So the doctors and all the scientists, all the smart people in the world, they get together and they try their best to get a vaccine that's going to help as many people as possible. And they're hoping that this vaccine this year is going to be good. And they're very confident, so they're just really urging people to get it. Now, I know you've never had one of these.
I've never had it.
And knock on wood, you've never had the flu.
Well,
have you?
I've gotten the flu, but I never feel like it's that bad.
Okay.
Because I'm worried about it, or is this just a thing people say that if you get this vaccine, can't you get the flu then?
And that's the thing, is like sometimes that happens.
See, I want to roll the dice, I guess.
Okay, good for you. Good for you. You like Vegas. You're a Vegas guy.
Yeah, I'm a Vegas guy.
But some people, you know, doctors at least, they really are saying that the best way to prevent getting very, very, very sick from this is to get I mean, because you can't really, I don't know. They're saying you should really at least just, you know, do everything that you can to make sure that you don't get it, because you never know, some people have really bad reactions to the flu.
That's true.
Yeah, you got lucky.
Yeah, I got lucky. I feel like this could be almost an intervention. You're like, you know,
you should do it.
You got to do it.
No, but do whatever you think. Do whatever you want to do. You know, it's a free country and everything.
Now, what about you?
So I got it.
All right.
But I don't get it every year. It's not something I always do.
Yes.
But because of the fact that we're seeing, you know, this kind of earlier prevalency of the flu, I wanted to, you know, make sure that I'm protected, because knowing me, it'll be my luck that I, you know. So, you know, I just wanted to do it just in case. So I did.
That's true.
It didn't hurt that bad. I mean, it wasn't pleasant or anything, but it wasn't that bad.
And maybe, does it give you a little bit more peace of mind, though?
It does, kind of.
Okay.
It does, but still in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh, is it going to be, you know, the right strain, or, you know, so I don't know. It does give me a little bit of peace of mind.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. Yeah, that's definitely something you got to think about, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, especially with kids.
And yeah, kids too, because and if you do get the flu, it could like wipe out your week.
I know, or your month if you're really unlucky. But hey, here's something else. Because this is all so early, this doctor who I talked to today was saying, make sure that you call your doctor and say, do you have the flu shot? Because they're still getting the treatments in.
Still getting the shipments in.
Right. So they're not holding these big, you know, flu, what are they called? Like clinics or whatever.
Yeah, yes.
So just call and, you know, ask your doctor if he or she has it.
Hey, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
All right, Liz. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and really letting us know. Flu's coming.
Flu's coming. Wash your hands.
You know, don't
Sneeze
they say
into your arm.
What do they say? The winter is coming.
Winter's coming. Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones. Little action.
The flu is coming.
The flu is coming. That could be a new meme.
There you go. You want to start that?
Yeah, we might want to start it.
Great.
All right. Well, coming up, everybody, we are going to continue to track Hurricane Maria as it continues to pound Puerto Rico. That and much more coming up next. And welcome back here, everyone, to News Now as we continue to look at this track of Hurricane Maria. 140 to 150 mile-per-hour winds as it is just slamming Puerto Rico right now. And we also have a Fox 11 reporter out there. That is with a satellite and radar image. We have the Fox 11 reporter out in Mexico City, where they will be covering the devastating earthquake there. So we'll bring that to you in just a little bit right here on News Now. It's been, so many different moving parts here sometimes with, we got the Hurricane Maria and then that devastating earthquake, like I was saying. Now more than 200 people affected there in the Mexico City area. And so let's show you this video footage that we have of the reporter there from our Fox 11 sister station that is covering this right now. And I'm just going to play back this video for you. We're going to listen in.
To Nala, a 6-year-old golden retriever. She has been working since yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She's already found 5 people with that nose, and her handler is Jan Ficacci. She's a volunteer. Jan, ¿qué difícil ha sido esto?
Mucho, muy fuerte, muy difícil, muy cansado.
Okay, we're continuing now just to look at some of the impact there. More than 200 people already dead there in Mexico, and unfortunately also a school was hit and more than 20 students there died, unfortunately, yesterday of that devastating earthquake, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. And you can see there rescue officials and recovery efforts are in full mode right now. Very unfortunate sight there as recovery efforts still ongoing. Now we're going to take a live look right now. United Nations meeting right now. You can see President Trump there with other world leaders. Let's listen in if we can for just a moment.
Sector, which can contribute to the enormous employment and empowerment needs of women and young people. This will contribute significantly to the reduction of refugee flows and mass migration to Western countries, the tragic spectacle of which challenges our collective consciousness. We are counting on you, therefore, to encourage American investors to become more interested in our continent, while ensuring that conditions will be created for a business-friendly climate. We also count on your leadership to make Exim Bank get more involved in Africa and support U.S. investors. We hope for great involvement of the United States. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, the positive dynamics in Africa in recent years have been...
All right, folks, we will continue to monitor whatever comes out of this meeting here with President Trump and the other world leaders. You see next to him, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, as well as his Chief of Staff. So we will continue to monitor this meeting here for you right here on News Now. We want to take you, though, to a video that is just really scary in itself. A sinkhole in an Orlando suburb at a home. Take a look at this dramatic video that we have for you of just this devastating sinkhole that was captured all on camera here. Take a look. You can see there that sinkhole opens up and swallows part of that home. Dramatic video. I'm going to show you some other shots here, right here. This is Poca, Florida, as the dramatic home video shows the backside of a family's home being swallowed by a sinkhole. The sound was hard to believe. It was very loud. The windows cracked, breaking. It was hard to watch, says Ellen Miller, describing herself as being numb from this situation. 50 years, both of my girls came home from the hospital there. So a very sad time for that family, as they obviously had so many memories inside that home. She said, I mowed the lawn yesterday, and right there at the house, it looked like it was sinking a little bit, and I saw what I thought was a blue line on the bottom of the house, and it was actually the stucco separating. The crack kept growing and growing. We watched it all through the night, she says, and heard all kinds of creaking and cracking, and got up at around 4 o'clock and looked in the bathroom, and the bathroom wall had opened up and the tub was sinking. What was going through her mind at that point? She says, I said, I think it's time to get out of Dodge. I walked around like someone with no good sense, not knowing what to do. It's hard, you know, we lived there for 49 years. How do you try to pack everything up? How do you figure out what's important and what's not? Miller grabbed the things that meant the most to her: computers that store years worth of pictures, family antiques, and an old-fashioned typewriter. She says, that has been in my family forever, and it's one of those things my mother passed down to me, and I didn't want to lose it all. With her kitchen ripped in half, her bathtub several feet below ground, she's counting her blessings. No one got hurt while trying to stay positive. And that's the main takeaway there. It's unfortunate there that they lost their property and some of their prized possessions, but the good thing that came out of this one, nobody was hurt. And let's show you that dramatic video one more time as it was caught all on camera here. Take a look as you could see it sinking, and then just a good section of that home crumbling there and being swallowed up. 25 feet. That is something there. We're going to show you. We also have aerials for you of that home. So we wish the very best for that family, as they will definitely have to either rebuild or move to a different area. The homeowner says crying is not going to do any good. It's not going to bring anything back. At last check, the sinkhole was 25 feet across and 15 feet deep, and unfortunately continues to grow there. And if you are one of her neighbors, you're probably thinking, are we going to be next? Sometimes that's what happens. We saw in the Tampa Bay area just about a month and a half ago of when a whole subdivision, about 3 to 4 homes, were affected by a sinkhole there. It's a common problem there in Florida. So we wish the very best for that family, as they will be having to make some tough decisions in the coming days there, no doubt. All right, coming up next here, folks, we want to show you a little bit of Mike Pence speaking at the United Nations. Vice President Mike Pence talking about North Korea threats and more. Let's listen in.
Do even more to keep the peace across the wider world. President Trump and I firmly believe that the UN must act to make its peacekeeping operations more efficient, more effective, more accountable, and more credible. Ambassador Haley has previously laid out the United States principles for peacekeeping reform, and we're all familiar with them. Peacekeeping missions must support a political solution, have the consent of the host country. Its mandates must be realistic and achievable. Every mission must have an exit strategy. And the United Nations peacekeeping missions must adjust to progress and failure. In short, when a mission succeeds, we should not prolong it. When a mission underperforms, we should restructure it. And when a mission consistently fails to fulfill the mandates of this Council, we should end it. We urge the United Nations to analyze all peacekeeping operations in light of these principles so that these missions most effectively advance peace across the wider world. After all, keeping the peace is at the heart of the United Nations mission. The very first words of the UN's charter are to maintain international peace. And just yesterday, President Trump challenged this great body to rededicate itself to this noble goal. And I do so today on behalf of our nation before this Security Council. History records that the United Nations was forged in the fading embers of the Second World War. the most destructive conflict in the history of the world. The United States of America, with our allies, emerged victorious, but in that victory, we vowed to come together to prevent dictators and demagogues from ever threatening the peace that we had won through our shared sacrifice. As President Harry Truman told us then, it was not sufficient to, in his words, merely check madmen who would plan world domination, but rather to bring together, again, and I quote, a mighty combination of nations founded upon justice and peace. And so we founded this great body, the United Nations. That was the rallying cry of the United Nations in the 20th century. And so it must be again in the 21st century. But keeping the peace requires more than peacekeeping. It requires action in the unwavering resolve of every country gathered here today. For as President Trump observed yesterday, we are once again confronted, in his words, by those who threaten us with chaos, with turmoil and terror, who seek to undermine the sovereignty, prosperity, and security, all of which the President called the pillars of peace. In Eastern Europe, Russia continues to compromise the sovereignty of its neighbors as it seeks to redraw international borders by force. Radical Islamic terrorism continues to beset nations with barbarous attacks in Barcelona, Paris, London. In the Middle East, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism continues to flout the spirit of the Iran deal, destabilizing the region and brazenly threatening the security of sovereign nations. And as the world has seen in just the past few days, a depraved regime in North Korea is relentlessly pursuing nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles, and now, as the President said, threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. Now, the United States is grateful to see this Security Council unanimously adopt 2 resolutions imposing tough new sanctions on the North Korean regime. But to be clear, the United States of America will continue to bring the full range of American power to bear on the regime in Pyongyang. We will continue to marshal economic and diplomatic pressure, ours and from countries across the world, to demand that North Korea abandon its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. As the President said yesterday, the United States has great strength and patience, but all options are on the table. And if we are forced to defend ourselves and our allies, we will do so with military power that is effective and overwhelming. We call on the United Nations and this Security Council to do more to keep the peace, much more, to confront the threat posed by North Korea. Finally, to keep the peace most effectively, this body must have the credibility to pursue peace by advancing the cause of human rights. It's no coincidence that some of the most dangerous regimes in the world are also some of the worst abusers of human rights. In Iran, North Korea, and other despotic regimes, we see a truth of history borne out once again. Those who subvert the freedom of their people at home undermine sovereignty and security abroad. The United Nations is bound by its charter to foster international cooperation in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all. That was the purpose under which the UN Human Rights Council was formed. But the truth is, the Human Rights Council doesn't deserve its name. As we look at the membership of the Council today, we see nations that betray these timeless principles upon which this institution was founded. Today, the United Nations Human Rights Council actually attracts and welcomes many of the worst human rights violators in the world. A clear majority of the Human Rights Council's members fail to meet even the most basic human rights standards. Cuba sits on the Human Rights Council, an oppressive regime that has repressed its people and jailed political opponents for more than half a century. Venezuela sits on the Human Rights Council, a dictatorship that undermines democracy at every turn, imprisons political opponents, and as we speak, is advancing policies that worsen deprivation and poverty that's costing the lives of innocent men, women, and children. This body must reform the Human Rights Council's membership and its operation. As to its operation, I think of what President John F. Kennedy warned more than 50 years ago, that the United Nations must not become, in his words, a forum for invective. Unfortunately, today, the Human Rights Council has become exactly that. And particularly, the Human Rights Council has become a forum for anti-Semitism and invective against Israel. The Council's Agenda Item 7 actually singles out Israel for discussion at every single meeting, something no other country must endure. As evidence, the Human Rights Council has passed more than 70 resolutions condemning Israel while largely ignoring the world's worst human rights abusers. It is, as President Trump said yesterday, a massive source of embarrassment. And we call on the Security Council and this entire body to immediately embrace reforms of the membership and practices of the Human Rights Council and end the Human Rights Council's blatant bias against our cherished ally, Israel. Under President Trump, the United States of America is firmly committed to the cause of human rights because we are committed to keeping the peace. Keeping the peace requires more than peacekeeping. It requires action, reform. And lastly, it also requires a willingness to call out senseless attacks on innocent people around the world. At this very moment in Southeast Asia, we see heartbreak and assaults on human rights and innocent civilians. It's ultimately endangering the sovereignty and security of the entire region. In recent weeks, the people of my country and the wider world have witnessed a great tragedy unfolding in Burma with the Rohingya people. Recently, Burmese security forces responded to militant attacks on government outposts with terrible savagery, burning villages, driving the Rohingya from their homes. The images of the violence and its victims have shocked the American people and decent people all over the world. And now we're witnessing a historic exodus. Over 400,000 Rohingya, including tens of thousands of children, have now been forced to flee from Burma to Bangladesh, with more following every day. Yesterday, Secretary of State Tillerson discussed Rohingya refugees with Aung San Suu Kyi and urged the Burmese government and military to facilitate humanitarian aid and confront the allegations of human rights abuses. And while we welcome Suu Kyi's comments that returning refugees have nothing to fear, the United States renews our call on Burma's security forces to end their violence immediately.
And more news now will continue coming up next. Welcome back here to News Now. You are taking a look here at the devastating impact of Hurricane Maria as it just continues to slam into Puerto Rico. We will have much more with this story coming up in just a little bit, but I want to kind of set the table here for us. Welcome everyone to News Now. We will also unfortunately have an update for the devastating earthquake that already has killed more than 200 people in Mexico from that earthquake yesterday. We'll have that for you and much more, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He was in San Diego and he announced a big drug bust by the United States Coast Guard. Wait till you hear some of the numbers associated with this drug bust, including cocaine and heroin. The amounts really startling there, and they were able to get them off the streets incoming here to America, stopping them before they even reached the shores here of America. So we'll have that for you coming up a little bit later, but we got to go back here to the main story of the day, and it is Hurricane Maria with these devastating visuals that we are seeing as it did make landfall on Puerto Rico as a powerful Category 4 storm early today, cutting electricity and phone lines, sending thousands of people into shelters and raising the prospect of deadly floods. The storm was bringing new misery to a region that has seen two other powerful hurricanes, Irma and Jose, in recent weeks. As of 11 a.m., Maria's core was moving over Puerto Rico with 140-mile-per-hour winds, the National Hurricane Center said. The storm was expected to produce life-threatening flooding with 12 to 18 inches of rain falling in Puerto Rico through Friday and an additional 5 to 10 inches of rain in the Virgin Islands. As the hurricane moved in, residents across Puerto Rico were awakened by the clamor of strengthening wind gusts. For Irma, we were very prepared, said the governor of Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, of course, none. Now we are feeling a second storm in 2 weeks, and this one much more devastating than the first one. Who knows what that damage will be? Here's the very latest. The storm made landfall in Puerto Rico's southeast area shortly after 6 a.m. today, with winds as strong as 155 miles per hour. It had crossed the United States Virgin Islands as a Category 5 storm, then weakened slightly but remained extremely dangerous. Electricity was knocked out for the whole island, according to a spokeswoman for the Puerto Rico State Agency for Emergency and Disaster Management. Hartley Henry, an advisor to the Prime Minister there of Dominica, told the Associated Press today that there had been 7 confirmed deaths from Hurricane Maria on that island. 2 people were also killed on the French Caribbean island of Guadeloupe, officials said. They are going to continue to monitor this storm here, but when you take a look there at the satellite image here that we have for you, I mean, this just really just shows you the massive storm that Hurricane Maria was. Once a Category 5 storm, now it is a 4, still with devastating winds of 140 to 155 miles per hour. And right now we are learning that it is headed next toward Turks and Caicos, which was slammed with Hurricane Irma. They're going to get a double punch as well. So we'll continue to monitor that story here for you right here on News Now. But now we want to take you to a visual that we have. It's just another sad update here for you. This is more than 200 dead in Mexico, and we have some video. I'm just going to play it out here. This is from a reporter with our Fox 11 sister station. They are in Mexico City covering this with a 7.1 magnitude as it destroyed hundreds of buildings. And right now you're looking, this was a recovery effort video taken at a school where unfortunately 23 students died when that building collapsed onto them. So it's just from one bad story to another here when we're talking about just natural disasters here. Let me play that video out here one more time. We're getting a feed in from our reporter out there that is embedded from Fox 11. So when we get more updates for you on this story, of course, we will pass that along to you. Coming up next a little bit later, we will be talking about Attorney General Jeff Sessions about the big drug bust the U.S. Coast Guard had, and it is astonishing the amount of pounds that were retrieved. We'll have all that for you coming up a little bit later. But next, we want to go to a little bit ago. The First Lady, Melania Trump, was speaking at the United Nations luncheon event, and she was talking about bullying in school classrooms as well as other crisis that children are dealing with right now in the 21st century. So we're going to play that video here for you right here on News Now. You're watching Melania Trump just moments ago at the United Nations.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. I would like to welcome and thank all of you for joining me here today. I'm honored to serve as First Lady of the United States, and I look forward to sharing with each of you my sincere hopes for all that we will be able to do together to promote peace, human rights, and human dignity, leaving no one behind, especially not our children. The most important and joyous role I ever had is to be a mother to my young son. And what could possibly be more essential focus in everyone's life than that of loving, educating, and bringing up our next generation to be happy, productive, and morally responsible adults. Together, we must acknowledge that all too often is the weakest, most innocent, and vulnerable among us, our children, who ultimately suffer the most from the challenges that plague our societies. Whether it is drug addiction, bullying, poverty, disease, trafficking, illiteracy, or hunger, it is the children who are hit first and hardest in any country. And as we all know, the future of every nation rests with the promise of their young people. If we look at the present state of children in any society, we will see the future that our world can expect tomorrow. Show me your civic lessons of today, and I will show you your civic leaders of tomorrow. Show me your history lessons of today, and I will show you your political leaders of tomorrow. Show me the loving bonds between your families today, and I will show you the patriotism and moral clarity of your nation tomorrow. Our choices on how we raise and educate our children will in fact provide the blueprint for the next generation. If we do not advocate a love of country to our children and the generations to come, then why would our children grow up to fight for their countries, founding principles and moral truths? If we do not teach our children the importance of helping those less fortunate, wherever they may be, then why would they become caring adults who dedicate themselves to charity? If we do not ensure that our youth redefine their nation of community to reach beyond their own backyards, their own schools, and their own town halls, then why would we accept to see a new generation of leaders with a moral conscience that includes all of humanity? When we join together as parents, caring for children, wherever they live in our own families, across the street, across the nation, or across the globe, we claim our responsibility to the next generation to ensure they are prepared to accept the torch of leadership for the world of tomorrow. And make no mistake, this will always begin with us, coming together to embrace parenthood's noble calling. Nothing could be more urgent nor worthy a cause than preparing future generations for the adulthood with true moral clarity and responsibility. To achieve this, we must come together for the good of our children, because through them our future will be defined. Therefore, we must teach each child the values of empathy and communication that are at the core of the kindness, mindfulness, integrity, and leadership, which can only be taught by example. By our own example, we must teach children to be good stewards of the world they will inherit. We must remember that they are watching and listening, so we must never miss an opportunity to teach life's many ethical lessons along the way. As adults, we are not merely responsible, we are accountable. I hope you will join me in recommitting ourselves to teaching the next generation to live by and honor the golden rule, to unto others as you would have them unto you, which is my paramount in today's society, and I'm focused as First Lady. It remains our generation's moral imperative to take responsibility for what our children learn. We must turn our focus right now to the message and content they are exposed to on a daily basis through social media, the bullying, the experience online and in person, and the growing global epidemic of drug addiction and drug overdose. No children should ever feel hungry, stalked, frightened, terrorized, bullied, isolated, or afraid, with nowhere to turn. We need to step up, come together, and ensure that our children's future is bright. In the coming months, I hope to reach out to each one of you here today, to call upon you for your support and guidance, and look forward to joining you in collaboration to support and educate our next generation. I'm asking leaders on social media whose target market for their products and platforms is children, as well community and educational leaders, to join me in this fight for the hopes and dreams of our children. With all my heart, I want to thank you, each one of you, for being here today, and tell you how much I'm looking forward to working with you on behalf of our children. God bless our children, God bless our nations, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
And more news now. We'll continue next. All right, folks, taking a live look here at our beautiful 10-day Foxcast, and well, gonna get up to 97 degrees, but take a look Friday and Saturday with that 85. Yes, we will definitely take it. And I also want to show you this. Some new dictionary words have been added to the list. These are some of the highlights. Froyo, that's frozen yogurt, folks. The second one is troll, and that's, you know, for the internet users when someone is just bashing another person, you call them a troll. And then it got a little spicy there with that sriracha.
There we go.
Yeah, so definitely. And now I'm joined by our very own Marcy Jones.
Yes, and that was me clapping. I had to give those, you know, welcome to the dictionary.
Yes,
that's
welcome.
A big deal.
Yeah.
Their knowledge.
Right?
You're in the club.
Yeah.
You're in the club.
So we're talking about a little trending topic here today, and this one really this caught my eye when I saw this. I was like,
it's hard not to catch your eye.
Yeah.
This is an eye catcher, folks.
This is an eye catcher.
Brace yourself.
So get this, a designer in London is coming out with this thing right here. This is a dad bod fanny pack.
Just guys, if you're eating right now, we apologize.
Yeah, look at this. So the designer said, well, this is why I wanted to do this. I really want a dad bod, but I know there's health risks involved. So why not just do a fanny pack that makes it look like you have one?
Yeah, he said, you know what? I want it, but I've got a six-pack, and that's my burden to bear. So I'm going to get this fanny pack so that I can feel what some dads around America feel like.
That is really interesting. I mean, this is going to play up really well, I think, for Halloween.
Look at how realistic that looks with the tiny hairs and everything.
That is.
Yeah.
And now, get this. It hasn't even gone on sale right now, but the first shipment is already sold out.
And it's made a big splash on the internet. Now, have you noticed that this is kind of a trend, okay? This isn't the first of its kind. Have you seen those? You know how
set it up for me, Marcy.
one-piece bathing suits is, as you know, if you haven't been living under a rock, have made a huge comeback, okay? You know, they have words on it now. Everybody's doing bachelorette, bride tribe, all that kind of stuff. But now, the one piece that came out that made a huge splash that reminds me of this is it's a man's stomach and chest area that women are wearing, so it kind of throws you off.
Wow.
So it looks like this, but it has the whole pectoral region, all that stuff, and that made a huge splash. I don't want to say, but I think maybe Urban Outfitters have one like that. But the fanny pack is hilarious.
Now, here's my question.
Okay.
Where does it stop after this? I mean, what are we going to see next now?
Well, this has been around before. We've seen the apron, you know, the black and white apron. That's the David statue. You know, people, we've seen cover-ups that have, you know, bikini spray painted on. I think it makes you laugh. It definitely will make you look twice.
There you go.
Especially on a beachgoer, you know.
And look at the designer is getting what he wanted. It's out there now. People are talking about it.
Do you think they come in varieties? Is there one, you know, with an appendix scar or a happy trail or I don't know?
Those are probably add-on features a little bit later, you know?
I bet you could draw on a freckle, you know, with a little eyeliner.
That's right. And, you know, it used to be just great remember when you had the t-shirt, but it looked like you had a tux on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that was great, and that was funny.
It's casual
now it's
and
kind
formal.
of like, ooh, okay.
I know.
Now I want to do a double look at that.
Yes. I can't imagine the tux t-shirt with that over, because it's like formal, casual, disgusting. It's so many emotions.
Here's what I'm wondering though, since where is the zipper for, because this is a fanny pack.
I think it's up top.
It's up top, okay.
It would almost be like a dad bod / C-section every time you open it.
Yeah, really, right.
And what do you keep in there? I like fanny packs. I have to defend them. I like fanny packs. I happen to have a vintage Bush Reagan one.
Oh, there you go.
From the 80s, and I mean, it's very useful at parties.
And why are those shirts are so popular? Just with the Bush Reagan shirts.
I know.
Tell me about.
I think it's just people want to remember a different time. They want to pay homage to someone else and remember, you know, like in the 80s.
That's totally interesting. I see that all the time now.
Yeah. Bush, it's a big one.
And folks, if you're just joining us, you're probably wondering, okay, what exactly?
Like, what is going on the screen right now?
We're talking about this London designer who is really making some waves on the internet.
Do you think this is going to catch on in America?
I don't see it. Because you know why? Because in America, we are so centered on you know, we love the aesthetics of beauty.
Yes.
This is the, you know, this is not what it's about.
This literally is letting it all hang out.
This is shock value.
This is shock value, letting it all hang out.
But this could be great for a Halloween setting up.
Are they going to make a female version?
Yeah.
Possibly with a belly ring tattoo.
And seeing how well it's doing for the men out there, they'll probably want to, you know, continue on.
How many euros do you think this sells for?
Oh, wow. Yeah,
can you put a price on a dad bod?
Yeah, can you really?
On a faux dad bod?
Now, this is for people that really want the dad bod, but they don't want to...
risk their health.
Yeah, risk their health.
Yeah. That doesn't look health risking to me. That looks like you maybe had a few extra Doritos.
Yeah. For a couple weeks.
For a couple weeks, yeah. Oh,
yeah,
look at it there.
So that's a story that we've been really...
it looks so realistic when they're sitting down.
It does. I mean, that is probably the most real. I can't even talk because I'm talking about it. Yeah,
it's a pooch pouch. Look at that. There it is.
Yeah, so very interesting. We just wanted to bring that up, and I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about this story, but we got to have Marcy up here to really bring it home.
Do well on a faux stomach, Marcy. Yep.
So that's great. Well,
awesome.
Thank you so much, Marcy, for coming by, you know, and stopping by and really talking about this big topic that is really taking over. Well, I see it a lot on Twitter right now.
Dad bod.
So if it does come to America, watch out.
Yep.
Because people are really going to get into it if it comes out here. We'll see. That's still up in the air, but right now in London, it is taking over by storm. Thank you so much, Marcy, for stopping by. And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look at downtown Phoenix as we continue on with more coverage from all over the country. When news does break, of course, we've got you covered right here on News Now. Hi, everybody. Mike Page. Happy to be here with you this afternoon on this Hump Day edition of News Now. The next story that we have here for you, a major drug bust in San Diego by the U.S. Coast Guard recently. You're going to be hearing from the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who went to visit the Coast Guard members who were part of that massive seizure. And we're talking more than $700 million drug bust. That's what the street value was of these drugs that didn't make it to the American shore. Thankfully, thank you to our amazing U.S. Coast Guard members. So let's show you just a little bit of that press briefing that happened today in San Diego. Attorney General Jeff Sessions thanking those U.S. Coast Guard members for that major seizure.
Well, thank you very much. And Admiral Zucomp, congratulations to you and the crew of this vessel and the tremendous work you're doing. I got a briefing shortly after becoming Attorney General, and it became very clear to me that the single most vulnerable part of the entire drug network may be their weakness at sea. So much of their drugs were coming in that direction, and we aren't able to interdict sufficiently those ships that we knew existed. So the Coast Guard has now tripled their effectiveness in those months already, and this revelation today, this incredibly large seizures, makes, I think, validates that. We need to help them to be even more effective. I see Mark Kahn over here from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They prosecute these cases. Venue in these cases is the first place you bring this shipload of drugs to, and the defendants, they bring them into this district, and they're prosecuted here and other districts in California and on the Gulf Coast. Look, we are facing a tremendous challenge. In 2015, we had 52,000 people die from drug overdoses in this country, numbers the likes of which we've never, ever seen before. I've been involved in drug prosecutions since the 1970s as a young prosecutor. We never have seen these kind of deaths before. The preliminary numbers for 2016 look like it will be well over 60,000 deaths. We are facing a challenge in this country with drug abuse, addiction that we've never seen before. There are three things that we measure our effectiveness against when we consider how effective we are in preventing drugs availability. One is availability. Drugs are more available now than in many years. Another one is price. Drugs are cheaper now than we've seen in many, many years. And the purity of the drugs. We're seeing purity at levels we've never seen before in the country. Heroin and cocaine purity levels are extraordinarily high. So this is a very effective process that's ongoing. Coast Guard is leading. They're looking for ways every day to enhance their ability to interdict these ships. And they're making progress. As I've said, they've tripled that. We've got a great challenge in our country. The Department of Justice is resolutely committed to success. We work with the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, U.S. Marshals. We do so many things there. We work with our Homeland Security partners as they work on these issues, and the Coast Guard in particular. So thank you, men and women of the United States Coast Guard, the $600 million, $700 million seizures that you have here represent something extraordinary, and it's something we want to build on. We want to make put continued pressure on the cartels, call on the American people to reject the drug culture, crack down on prescription drugs that often lead to opioid excess, and crack down on this new and even more dangerous substance, fentanyl. Thank you all, and congratulations on the great work you're doing.
All right, that was Attorney General Jeff Sessions talking about 50,000 pounds of cocaine and heroin seized by the U.S. Coast Guard there in San Diego recently, and he wanted to acknowledge them and visit those members that were part of that massive seizure. We're talking more than $700 million on the street level there. That's what that 50,000 pounds was worth. So incredible job there by the U.S. Coast Guard. We're going to continue on here right now on News Now. We do want to show you just a little bit. This is Bill Gates introducing Barack Obama at a speech there in New York City. We're going to show you just a little bit of this as we continue on right here for you on News Now.
Senator, and then, of course, as the 44th President of the United States. I got to meet with President Obama a number of times, and I was always impressed by how he wasn't discouraged, even when tough challenges came along. He stayed focused on the work, He did what he could to make positive change. And now he's continuing that incredible commitment with the Obama Foundation. Please welcome former President Barack Obama.
Thank you so much. Well, please, everybody have a seat. Have a seat. We got work to do here. Thank you, Bill, for that introduction. More importantly, thank you and Melinda for your tireless efforts towards making a better world. I've been reading about these goalkeepers. You guys are pretty inspirational. And I am excited to be here with you. And whether it's girls' education or global health or climate change, you're setting a standard for the sorts of innovation and persistence and activism that the world desperately needs right now. So I could not be prouder. And that's really what I'm going to talk about very briefly before I have a chance for a discussion with Bill and Melinda. I want to talk about changing the world. I remember sitting down with Bill in Paris a couple of years ago, where the world was coming together to hammer out an agreement, a small agreement to save the planet by taking meaningful action to tackle climate change. It's a threat that may define the contours of this century more than just about anything else. Here was the interesting thing. Bill saw this not simply as a challenge, but also as an opportunity. And I remember him in sort of a matter-of-fact way saying, well, we're going to just have to go ahead and invent some new technologies. Which I said, I agree, let's do that. Although he knows more than me about inventing new technologies. But his tone was, yes, this is hard, but we can figure it out. It's hard, but it can be done. And that spirit, a spirit that says, to quote, I guess myself, yes, we can, rather than that spirit, rather than a spirit of despair, is the motor by which we've been able to see real progress in reducing the pace of carbon emission increases here in the U.S. And even if at the current moment the federal government is not as engaged in these efforts as I would like, nevertheless, progress continues because of the efforts of people like Bill and a whole host of entrepreneurs and universities and cities and states. They are making change around energy policy in America, separate and apart from what government is doing. And that gives me confidence that we can continue to make progress. And my broader point here is that you tend to believe when Bill says we can do something, that we can do it. And when all of you stand up and say this is something we can do, that spirit is infectious. And it's exactly what we need right now. We do face extraordinary challenges. You've heard of many of them in your discussions today. You know the nature of these challenges from your work. Growing economic inequality, a changing climate, terrorism, mass migration, still too much extreme poverty, still too many girls who are denied an education, the rise of nationalism and xenophobia, and a politics that says it's not we, but us and them. A politics that threatens to turn good people away from the kind of collective action that has always driven human progress. So these are real challenges, and we can't sugarcoat them. They're going to take a long time to solve. But that can't discourage any of us from the belief that individually and collectively, we can make a difference. We can make things better. And rather than be daunted by those challenges should inspire us. and excite us because it gives us an opportunity to make our mark on the world in ways that we haven't even yet scratched the surface of. We have to reject the notion that we're suddenly gripped by forces that we cannot control. We've got to embrace the longer and more optimistic view of history and the part that we play in it. And if you are skeptical of such...
All right, folks, we are going to take you now to Washington, D.C., where we are seeing Secretary of Defense James Mattis with the Australian Minister for Defense right now at the Department of Defense. Let's listen in. And now you are looking at this tape playback right now of Secretary Mattis with the Australian Minister for Defense. This is Marise Payne. Payne became the first female Minister for Defense back on September 21st, 2015, so almost 2 years ago to the date here. Let's listen in to a little bit of this meeting. You're watching News Now.
Officers, welcome back, and the delegation, welcome to the Pentagon. I think, if I recall right, this is our 6th meeting in about 8 months, which says something about the collaboration and the spirit of partnership that we both inherited and we share now. It's something that reminds us that the Australia-U.S. Defense Alliance is absolutely ironclad, based on many years, over 6 decades of mutual trust and respect earned on the battlefields and a friendship across the sea. This is a friendship that formed in the trenches of World War I during the Battle of Hamel on the 4th of July, 1918, when our troops first fought side by side, and even under an Australian general officer commanding. And it's good to note that what helped turn the tide on the Western Front under Australian General Monash was also the first time American troops fought in offensive action under a foreign commander. And it says a lot about the level of trust that we started with then, and it has only grown over the years, because since then we've fought side by side so many times in so many different places. The courage, the dedication, the ethics, and the ferocity of your troops, all these are as inspiring now as they were when we were fighting in the various theaters throughout our nation's history. And I've witnessed this dedication firsthand while serving alongside Australian forces. You're a trusted ally, and why do I say that? Because you're an ally that tells us what we need to hear, not necessarily what we want to hear. And you're also an ally who's always worth listening to. Today we're going to discuss threats to our common security, from terrorism and destabilizing activities in the South China Sea to North Korean provocations. And I think it says something. You and I were together at NATO here some time ago, and the Secretary General Stoltenberg said just last week at NATO, the reckless behavior of North Korea is a global threat and requires a global response. And I know our two nations will stand together in defense of freedom and liberty. Where we see Australia fully committed to global stability, to global security, and to passing freedom on to your next generation of Australians. So, Minister, members of the delegation, thank you for coming here. You, your team, your ideas are always welcome here in the Pentagon. Thank you, Minister Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you very much for a very impressive welcome, as ever, and it's a great pleasure to be back here at the Pentagon, but also to be meeting with you again this year. As you say, it has been a year of rapid activity, and we've had the opportunity for a number of key discussions, including most recently our OSMIN meeting in Sydney, which I think we'll both agree was an excellent engagement between ourselves and Ministers Bishop and Secretary Tillerson. You're absolutely right in terms of the history that we share from the First World War and the trenches of those horrific battles. And I am very impressed to see so many of you wearing your mateship pins. Not nearly as impressed as His Excellency, I suspect. But
he's very impressed.
He is very impressed. But it is a very significant message that those pins and in fact the entire story of the history of mateship represent for our two nations. So from those battles of the First World War through the Second World War and everything since, we have fought side by side in some of the most trenchant and difficult conflicts of our age. And I think where we share space now in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, these are equally important markers of the depth of the relationship, of the special nature of the alliance, and the importance of the values that we both hold dear as nations. We find ourselves, as you and I both know, in particularly challenging and dynamic times. Dynamic not necessarily in a good way. Dynamic in terms of rapid change, military modernisation in the Indo-Pacific in particular, but an Indo-Pacific region which is very vulnerable. Where we are going to speak today about matters that concern North Korea, for example, I know that there are challenges in those issues that we will have to face together, and you can be assured of Australia's support. My Prime Minister has made that very clear. So I look forward to a very productive discussion. I hope that we'll be able to find some good news in and amongst all the challenges, and I know that we will. There are enormous opportunities while there are challenges, and I look forward to discussing those with you and your team further.
Again, welcome, Minister. The Australian SAS troops were the first to join us after 9/11, when among the 3,000 innocent people from 90 countries who were killed were, I think, 11 Australians that bad day. And you stood tall with us then, and we're grateful for that alliance, the mateship, as you put it so well. Ambassador, thank you for what you're doing to keep it alive. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, for coming up, and please excuse us now so we can get down to work. Thank you.
Welcome back to News and Now. We are still continuing coverage here of Hurricane Maria slamming into Puerto Rico. Right now, a Category 4 storm, and right now all of Puerto Rico without power this Wednesday afternoon. Officials said just hours after Hurricane Maria made landfall on the island as a Category 4 storm. The Puerto Rico Office of Emergency Management Agency confirmed that 100% of the U.S. territory has lost power, noting that anyone with electricity is using a generator. The Puerto Rico governor has said that Hurricane Maria has caused severe damage to infrastructure. A Category 4 storm has not hit the island since 1932. As of 2 p.m. local time there, Maria had weakened to a Category 3 hurricane with maximum sustained winds down to 155 miles per hour as the storm moved over Puerto Rico, according to the National Hurricane Center. A weather station some 43 miles from San Juan reported a sustained wind of 71 miles per hour and a wind gust of 91 miles per hour on Wednesday morning. Today, this is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. That's what the National Hurricane Center has warned. Hurricane Maria is 450 miles wide, and hurricane force winds extend up to 60 miles from its center. Storm surge was predicted to be 6 to 9 feet in coastal Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Rainfall totals for Puerto Rico were projected anywhere from 12 to 18 inches, with as much as 35 inches in some isolated areas. So our continued thoughts are with the people there in Puerto Rico, as they just had to deal with Hurricane Irma, and now they're getting that sick 1-2 punch now from Hurricane Maria. So we'll have more updates for you right there on fox10phoenix.com when they do become available. Once again, our thoughts with everybody out there, as you can just see those winds are just ripping up pieces there in homes in Puerto Rico. Moving on here now on News Now, we're taking a live look here. We got a feed coming in from the United Nations. The British Prime Minister Theresa May is making some remarks. Let's listen in for a little bit. You're watching News Now.
Reforms, important as they are. It is also about reforms that enable the United Nations to truly respond to the global challenges of the 21st century. At last year's General Assembly, we undertook to do far more to resolve the challenges of refugee and migration flows. We agreed to develop global compacts to address the causes and the consequences of the mass movements of people we see today. This was an important step to elevate significantly our global response and enable us collectively to tackle this challenge of our times. So in the year ahead, as well as agreeing the principles of these compacts, we must ensure they can be applied in practice. We must do more to identify, protect and support refugees and those hosting them near conflicts. And on migration, our starting point must be that it can benefit both countries and migrants themselves, but only when it is safe, orderly, well managed and legal. If we do not manage this effectively, we will fail both our own citizens and those taking these dangerous journeys. And we will push more people into the curse of modern slavery and the hands of the human traffickers and organized criminal groups that drive this inhuman industry. But the steps we are agreeing through these compacts alone will not be enough. For if people cannot find jobs, opportunity, and hope for themselves and their families where they live, they will continue to look elsewhere. And so as a United Nations and as members, we must work harder to combine the efforts of our development programs with the private sector and the international financial institutions to support the creation of jobs and livelihoods that will address not just the consequences, but the causes of this great challenge of our time. For the truth is that despite our best efforts, we are not succeeding. We must do more. The same is true with terrorism, where again the challenges we face today are vastly different from those of previous eras. When terrorists struck London and Manchester this year, the world saw our cities come together in defiance. our Parliament carries on. Ariana Grande came back to Manchester and sang again. London Bridge is bustling with people. Our communities came together at the Finsbury Park Mosque in North London, and Londoners got back on the tube. The terrorists did not win, for we will never let anyone destroy our way of life. But defiance alone is not enough. As leaders, we have all visited too many hospitals and seen too many innocent people murdered in our countries. In the last decade, hundreds of thousands have been killed by terrorists across the world. This is a truly global tragedy that is increasingly touching the lives of us all. This year is the 10th anniversary of the death of the woman who introduced me to my husband and who is known well to many of us in this United Nations. Benazir Bhutto was brutally murdered by people who actively rejected the values that all of us here in this United Nations stand for, in a country that has suffered more than most at the hands of terrorists. Murdered for standing up for democracy, murdered for espousing tolerance, and murdered for being a woman. When I think of the hundreds of thousands of victims of terrorism in countries across the world, I think of their friends, their families, their communities, devastated by this evil, and I say enough is enough. So, of course, we must continue to take the fight to these terrorist groups on the battlefield, and the UK will remain at the forefront of this effort, while also helping to build the capabilities of our alliances and our partners to better take on this challenge. And we must also step up our efforts as never before to tackle the terrorist use of the internet. For as the threat from terrorists evolves, so must our cooperation. And that is why today, for the first time in the UN, governments and industry, through the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism, will be coming together to do just that. The tech companies have made significant progress on this issue, but we need to go further and faster to reduce the time it takes to remove terrorist content online and to increase significantly their efforts to stop it being uploaded in the first place. This is a major step in reclaiming the internet from those who would use it to do us harm. But ultimately, it is not just the terrorists themselves who we need to defeat. It is the extremist ideologies that fuel them. It is the ideologies that preach hatred, sow division, and undermine our common humanity. We must be far more robust in identifying these ideologies and defeating them across all parts of our societies. As I said in the aftermath of the attack on London Bridge this summer, we have to face the fact that this will require some difficult conversations. We all need to come together to take on this extremism that lives among us and to nurture the common values that must ultimately win out. These are the values of this United Nations. And yet, despite our best efforts, we as nations and as a united nations have not found the ways or the means to truly take on this threat.
Right, listening to Theresa May there, the British Prime Minister, making remarks about terrorism across the world and including right there in England, where they no doubt have had some in the recent past couple of months there. You are watching News Now, and we do want to now just shift our focus now to one of the other huge stories of that massive earthquake in Mexico. I really want to show you a shot that is a picture that is really picking up on social media. It really just shows the absolute destruction there and then the recovery efforts as they look for bodies across the area in Mexico where this magnitude 7.1 destroyed hundreds of buildings and more than 200 people, including, unfortunately, 21 school children are dead after that massive earthquake rocked central Mexico yesterday afternoon. It actually hit on the 32nd anniversary of the biggest quake to strike the country's capital. Yesterday's earthquake was centered about 75 miles southeast of Mexico City and caused extensive damage, leaving at least 44 buildings, including homes, schools, and office buildings according to the Mexican president, who did a flyover of the city Tuesday afternoon. And we've been learning as of today, those number of buildings have gone up to now more than 100. Among the dead are at least 25 people, 21 students and 4 teachers at a collapsed primary school in the south of the capital. So far, 11 people have been rescued, but 2 students and 1 teacher remain missing. Rescuers continue to comb through the wreckage, looking for survivors today, pausing to listen for voices. Relatives told the Associated Press that they received a WhatsApp message from 2 girls inside saying that children are often the most vulnerable in emergencies such as this. And we are particularly concerned because schools across the region were in session and filled with students at that time. So our thoughts are with everybody there in Mexico City as they begin the cleanup process and still looking for people that may still be trapped there because of that massive earthquake. And then we will continue to follow along for you right here on News Now and our properties of Fox 10 News as well as fox10phoenix.com as we continue to track Hurricane Maria here for you. It's been a Category 4 and then it went back to a 3 and now a 4 again. So far killed 7 people in Dominica alone. And people are worried now of flooding there. The officials there are expecting anywhere from 12 to 18 inches of rain as well. Some isolated areas could get up to 35 inches. They haven't had a storm like this, a Category 4 that attacked Puerto Rico since the 1930s. So they are really reeling from this storm, and our thoughts go out to everybody there. You can take a look there as well from our radar as it is still churning up and now heading to Turks and Caicos. So we'll be able to give you updates tomorrow as well right here on News Now and of course fox10phoenix.com for all the very latest info. You can take a look there. This is San Juan right now. It is still very stormy there at sea as Hurricane Maria making its presence known there in Puerto Rico. We wish everybody a great afternoon. I'm Mike Pace. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Diplomacy to ensure that we have not had to exercise our veto in a generation, seeking to foster international cooperation, not frustrate it. But others have not done so. One country in particular has used its veto as many times in the last 5 years as in the whole of the second half of the Cold War. And in so doing, they have prevented action against a despicable regime that has murdered its own people with chemical weapons. As a result, in Syria, the United Nations has been blocked. This has undermined the values that we hold dear and the international rules-based system that is the basis of security and prosperity around the world. Now we face an even more immediate global danger in the activities of Kim Jong-un and his regime in DPRK. Time after time, he has shown contempt for the international community of law-abiding states, contempt for his neighbours, and contempt for the institutions and rules that have preserved peace and security. On this challenge, the UN in recent weeks has shown it can step up to the task, with last Monday's Security Council resolution creating the biggest sanctions package of the 21st century. We have seen regional and global powers coming together and, as in its founding charter, putting aside limited self-interest to show leadership on behalf of the wider world. But despite these efforts, DPRK continues to defy and provoke the international community and threaten its neighbours. And unless all Security Council members continue to live up to the special responsibilities that are placed upon us, and in seeking to resolve this crisis, be prepared to take all necessary measures to tackle this threat, we will not be able to bring stability to the Korean Peninsula. So as the world looks on, I am calling for further steps and for nations with this special responsibility to work together and exert the pressure we know is necessary to force Kim Jong-un to change his ways. Let us not fail this time. Let our message to North Korea be clear. Our determination to uphold these rules is stronger by far than their determination to undermine them. Mr. President, throughout the history of this United Nations, countries have shown time and time again that by being true to our values, rules and standards, it is possible to come together and to deliver in ways that have the most extraordinary impact on the lives of the people we serve. I believe we can do so again. We must do so again, and we will do so again. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank Her Excellency Theresa May, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Paolo Gentiloni, President of the Council of Ministers of the Republic of Italy. I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Signor Presidente,
Mr. President,
signor Segretario Generale, cari colleghi delegati, signore e signori,
ladies and gentlemen,
non posso cominciare il mio intervento senza rivolgere un pensiero a un paese amico colpito da una gravissima catastrofe naturale, il Messico, al quale va la nostra solidarietà alle famiglie delle vittime e il nostro incoraggiamento ai soccorritori. Questa nostra assemblea, la 72esima Assemblea Generale, si svolge in un contesto mondiale in continuo movimento. Gli effetti socio-economici della globalizzazione, che creano talvolta disagio e ineguaglianze, si sommano al perdurare di una forte instabilità del quadro geopolitico. Insomma, il mondo appare sempre più imprevedibile. È proprio quando si confronta con sfide straordinarie che la comunità internazionale deve dimostrare di superare gli ostacoli, guardando con fiducia nel futuro.